Hey, Brother Maker. Kylie and Elgin. I mean, you know me. I'm in your class. But this is our final video, and I'm really pumped. I mean, I've loved this class, but I'm kind of excited. So for my website today, I showed Kinsey Duncan. She's my roommate, and so she'll be asking the questions and asking about Rwanda, which is my country. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. Kinsey, what were some of the questions you had about the website?
Well, I was kind of wondering, like, what was the most important or, like, cool thing that you learned about when you were adopting your country?
Well, what I thought was really cool was, like, the first day, like, when we showed up and, like, they handed us, like, slips of paper, and we had to, like, you know, get our country. And at first I was like, I have no idea even where Rwanda is. You can see it on my video. Like, did you see it?
Yeah.
I was like, I have no idea where this country is. And, like, it was really cool to, like, look it up and realize, like, it is a tiny, tiny place in Africa. And, like, I mean, it's crazy, like, all the countries in Africa that we have no idea that are there. So I think that was interesting. The coolest thing was just, like, finding all the information. I mean, like, just figuring out, like, how it works, like, how much different it is in the United States. Yeah, it was pretty cool. I liked learning about it.
So, like, what was the, like, number one problem that Rwanda faced?
Probably, honestly, like, poverty. They don't have globalization, which is basically, like, the flattening of the world, like, how, like, it, like, globalizes, like, across, like, countries. And it doesn't do that very good. It honestly just, it finds goods within itself. So I think it was crazy to see that they're just very isolated. I mean, they've only had, like, 4 presidents. So I think the number one problem is just the poverty level. They don't really know how to, like, fix that, and they're not doing a very good job at it.
That sounds really rough.
It does.
So, do you really enjoy this class? Like, what would you recommend this class to other people?
Oh, yeah. Like, at first, like, I kind of didn't really like it because, no offense, Brother Meeker, I didn't really like it because, you know, I was, like, thinking, like, I have no idea about this country. Like, how am I supposed to, like, find out all this stuff? But I really liked, like, at BYU, how you go into the gospel related, and I really liked, how we looked at real life issues, like, not just, like, in Rwanda, but all the countries, all the developing world countries, which is mainly, like, what we were focusing on, like, not, like, top countries that have already made it, but the countries that are still trying to get to where the United States even is. So it was a really big eye-opener into, like, people, like, aren't living the way we are. And I think, like, I never realized that, or, like, you don't think about it. I mean, you watch videos and you're like, oh, that's really sad, but you're, like, you're not really into it, and you don't really see it firsthand.
Because it seems unreal.
Yeah, exactly. So I just really opened my eyes into that. Like, I loved all the videos we watched, just about, like, girls growing up in Africa, all the hard things they had to do. We watched a video about Time for School, and it's, like, about these, like, 7 or 8 different kids went, like, what they went through to just be able to go to school. And, like, I mean, I complained about doing homework. So, I mean, it was very gratifying, very humbling.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's cool.
So, like, the only thing that I've ever really heard about Rwanda was, like, the genocide, but I don't really know what happened there. What exactly is the Rwanda genocide?
Well, basically, like, there were 2 clans, like the Tutsi and the Hutu or something. I don't know. I just probably botched that completely.
Tutsi.
Yeah. Anyway, but they were against each other, and I'm pretty sure the Hutu, like, all of a sudden, like, went against the Tutsi, and just a massive killing, just completely up to 1 million people, which is 20% of the population of Rwanda.
Whoa.
So it was a huge shock to Rwanda, and I think, like, I mean, it was a really bad thing, but I think it really opened the officials' eyes, like the presidents and the government, to it was really cool to, like, look up Rwanda and how its political nature's changed, how it's becoming more of a democracy where they ask the people. Before it was more like, not a dictatorship, but it was mainly the president doing everything. And now I think, now that they've seen how the 2 clans clashed and all the awful killing that was done, I think they're trying to bring the people in more. And it's super cool to see just the changes they're making. But it was an awful thing, and it really changed the country, and it really affected it. They're still environmentally impacted. I mean,
do you think that's, like, one of the reasons why they hit rock bottom poverty? is because of this.
I think
genocide?
I think it is. Like, I mean, imagine like being in a war and like not necessarily a war, but I mean being killed and people losing jobs because of discrimination. I mean, it definitely impacted them in a big way. Just in the way that, I mean, imagine like in Idaho, like two parts splitting, and it's like people are getting killed. I mean, it's just massive chaos, and we don't really understand it because it hasn't happened here since the Civil War. But it's like, yeah, I think poverty definitely was affected, and people, there's just not many jobs there. I mean, they don't have much schooling. It's not like they can progress in the way that the United States is. I mean, we can quit a job and find another one, but it's like them. It's like they, whatever they're given, and they have to accept it and grow with it.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. Well, thanks for the questions. I'm gonna now teach you about the 8 Millennium Development Goals, which is like basically like the core subject of the whole like class, and I thought it was super cool. I was also like, I don't know, it was like I was also kind of like upset as we went through the class because none of the goals seemed like they were being reached. I mean, this goal is supposed to be done by 2015, and half of these countries aren't even close. Like Iraq, going through the war, I had a girl in a lot of my groups, and I mean, it's still just like, I mean, it's crazy. So there's poverty in education, which is basically like they have to reach like a certain like poverty level. Like, I mean, where most people have jobs, they're like out of poverty. And I think the goal for Rwanda was for education was to have people get at least a high school education because I think for the most part, kids aren't even making it to high school. And I mean, there's like, they have basically no hope for college. The second to our gender equality and infant mortality. So I think Rwanda is doing really good with gender equality. I mean, there's some women in government. They don't really. I mean, I'm sure that there's definite like differences from here in Rwanda, but for the most part, I thought it was pretty good. Infant mortality is doing so much better. They're starting to gain knowledge of ways of having babies better. We watched a video in class of people who they would lose babies so much that they would stop caring, so they would like leave their babies like on like a box and just like let them cry because I mean to us that's really cruel, but to them that was their way of adapting. That was their way of like not feeling. And I think Rwanda is definitely like out of that now in that they're starting to educate people in that they've got to do something different. They've got to go to like a hospital. They've got to have a clean environment.
So were there any like conditions that were going on with the children? Like,
I think mainly because they weren't breastfeeding them. They would feed them sugar water, which is very unhealthy.
Yeah.
It mainly just was they weren't in a clean environment. The kids would get sick. The likelihood that they would survive long wasn't likely because they were in poverty. I mean, it's the situations are terrible in a lot of different countries, and I don't think we necessarily see that.
Wow.
Okay, so then the next two is HIV, AIDS, and maternal health. So in Rwanda, I think HIV and AIDS is still pretty high, but the education is getting bigger and it's getting better. They're definitely starting to realize that it's something that has to change. HIV and AIDS isn't necessarily coming because what is it? It's mainly because they're sleeping with more than one partner in like a month. Like it doesn't come if you like sleep with, like not that we as LDS people do that, but it doesn't come if you like sleep with multiple people in like course of a long period. But it's when they're doing it in a course of like a month. And this is seen like we watched a video in class again where I mean girls were being trafficked and they felt like they had to do this because it was a way to gain money easily for their family.
So for their culture, does that mean they didn't really have families? Like, were there no marriages? I mean, why were they?
No, there's marriages, but it's there's definite marriages, but the men like they'll go like sleep around or I mean I think it's like I said they're definitely improving, developing into that. I think in Rwanda it's a better place than some African countries. They do this quite frequently. In Rwanda, HIV and AIDS wasn't super high. So I think they're definitely doing better at educating using condoms, stuff like that. Definitely being more educated. And finally, the last two goals were global partnership and environmental sustainability. And this is like I was talking about how easily they can like trade with the United States or give their goods out. And Rwanda doesn't necessarily have any like goods that a country would need. That's why it mainly sticks within itself. It mainly trades within itself. It doesn't have a lot of big companies, not a lot of big cities, so it's not like companies can interact within each other. It's just a really small place that isn't necessarily getting the globalization it needs. And the environment is definitely changing. From the genocide, there were lots of things that impacted it, like sewers, like were going all over, like rampaging towns. Like it just ruined the environment. And also, like where HIV and AIDS came in was mainly from the genocide because the people that would come in and rampage towns would also sleep with women and rape them basically. And that really impacted the spread of HIV for a while because then women didn't know they had it, so they would sleep with their husbands, go to, it was a super spreading disease. But like I said, I think the genocide is mainly a huge impact. That's why I was glad you asked that question because it was a huge impact in many of their Millennium Development Goals. So I think they're doing better, but I'm not. I guess the thing is, I'm not sure how they can globalize better because you have to have the necessary goods. Like we were talking about the flat world and how countries who progress faster are people with good environment and people with goods to give, such as the United States. We have such a globalized thing because we have agriculture. We have companies who spread throughout the world, and Africa doesn't really have this ability. It doesn't even really have the internet at a very easy access.
Does it have libraries?
It does have libraries, but they're not extensive. It's just like their education. They go to a certain point, and even the teachers who are teaching don't even really know past a certain point because they were only educated to a certain point. So we talked about in class like how we could help them, but I think the thing is it's not good to just send a United States teacher over there because it's like then that culture is just going to go around and say we need to get to the United States. But if we taught their teachers, brought them over, taught them our education, then sent them back, they're learning from someone who is from their culture. So it's like they're still apt to understand that sometimes they can't come to school because they're helping their parents, but they're also saying this is important, this education is important. And so it's definitely things that just really are, I think there's ways to develop, but it also asks us to talk about like the future of our country, what we think is going to happen. And honestly, I'm not sure because I don't think Rwanda is going to meet a lot of the Millennium Development Goals by 2015. So I really hope that the United Nations, that's who made these goals, the United Nations came together and they said, look, our countries aren't doing good and we need to level it out. We need to find goals that can impact the countries we live in and help us out and like help each other out. And I just don't think they're going to make a lot of these goals by 2015 because I'm sure they're going to make some of them, but for the most part, it's got to keep going. We've got to keep improving. And I hope that just because when the time comes in 2015, that they just don't quit, that it's going to be a continuous relief. And I think, honestly, my biggest thing was education because I just don't think they're growing up in a different culture where they don't really understand, like we talked about in class one time, female genital mutilation. They do this because it's in their culture. They don't understand how hurtful it is.
What exactly is it?
It's basically where you mess with a woman's body part and you cut out different pieces. And they did this because men, there's many different reasons, but mainly men didn't want their women to be sleeping around, and it was a sure way. And women just don't get that they can stand up for that they don't have to do that. There's scary consequences. Some cultures will kick them out if they don't. But I think the biggest thing is if we educate them on how to, do things differently, like how to give birth better, how to, wear condoms. I mean, I know that we as the church don't really support like having sex out of marriage.
Well, do they have condoms readily available to them?
And see, I'm not sure about that. Rwanda's definitely not the most like, here we have all of this, but it definitely is growing. It's definitely learning. There's definitely a lot of different countries that are worse off than them, but I do believe that they need to change a lot of things. They need to give education more readily. But poverty is hard because there's not many jobs that they can get, and especially without a good education. So,
well, yeah, that's exactly the worst part about the pulley-pull system is without an education, you can't really rise out of poverty.
But it was interesting. There's a guy named Han Rosling, and he talked about how even though these countries aren't necessarily to the point where the United States are, we can't compare Africa to the United States, because in their own way, if we look at the progress they've made, it's amazing. I mean, that's what another cool part of this class was. I mean, if you look at how far they've come in their own way, it's truly amazing. But I just wish we could help in different ways. And there are many different ways that, you can, there's websites where you can donate to these kids so that they can get an education, or people who are trying to create their own websites. It's just really cool to see that just because they're in these situations doesn't mean that they can't get out, and it's not their fault. And yeah, it's definitely a cool class, and I really like it.
Oh, it's really amazing. Thank you for telling me about Rwanda.
Well, I hope you learned something.
Yeah.
Well, Brother Meeker, I hope you're having a fun time in Africa. Thanks for the class. Bye.